Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm so glad you're here with us today for a very special program. I'm your host, Sydney Ross, Outdoor Education Manager for Deep Roots. As some of you may have noticed, our show has a brand new look and feel. We are officially rebranding our long running nature series as Curious by Nature. This new title reflects the heart of what we do, exploring, asking questions, and discovering the wonders of the natural world right here in our own communities. Thank you for joining us for this soft launch. We're excited to grow into this new identity together. Starting in September, we are piloting a new broadcasting time. First Thursdays will remain at noon, while our third Thursday will air live at 6 p.m. Our hope is to connect more people to nature following the workday. Please spread the word and visit us online at deeproots.org to see our show schedule. And while we get started, I want you to think about this. When you hear the word watershed, what's the first image or idea that comes to mind? Go ahead and share it in the chat. I'll take a peek at some of your answers later on. Before we dive into today's topic, I'd like to share a few updates and announcements. First, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Johnson County Park and Recreation District, for hosting today's episode. And special thanks to donors like you who make programs like this possible. We've got a full lineup of programs scheduled through the end of the year. These will continue to spotlight the plants, wildlife, and habitats that make our region unique, and how each of us can take action to support them. You'll find familiar favorites, as well as new topics that dig deeper into our local ecosystems. Be sure to mark your calendars and share with friends who might enjoy joining us. I'm excited to announce one of our signature events, the Habitat Garden Tour and Native Plant Sale, happening on Saturday, September 13th in Prairie Village, Kansas. This is a fantastic opportunity to see how everyday people are transforming their yards into thriving habitat for birds, butterflies, and pollinators. And of course, to stock up on native plants for your own garden. Fall is a great time to get planting. Our Habitat Garden Tour and Native Plant Sale is a highlight of the season, and we'd love to see you there. Please consider volunteering with us at these events. Volunteers for the plant sale and garden tour will receive a free ticket to visit the gardens on tour that day. And if you enjoyed our first episode on the Blue River Watershed, then you're in for a treat. I'm leading our fall guided naturalist walk on the Blue River Streamway Trail Saturday, September 20th. Take a leisurely walk through a stunning wetland full of plants and wildlife. View the Blue River as it meanders through the woods, making its way up to the mighty Moe. You won't want to miss it, and I hope to see you there. As always, this webinar will be recorded and all resources available afterwards. I'll be sending you an email with links to our show notes following today's episode. Don't forget, drop your comments in the chat and put your questions in the Q&A. Our guest expert will join us for a live Q&A session following today's show to discuss native landscapes, both small and large. After today's show, I hope you'll also visit us online at deeproots.org to learn more information on upcoming events, webinars, native gardening resources, and how to get involved. While you're there, consider making a donation. All right, I'd like to welcome our guest expert to the virtual stage, Mr. Matthew Garrett, Natural Resource Manager for Johnson County Park and Recreation District. He's dedicated his entire career to the environmental education movement and natural resource management in the Kansas City region. Matt's a regional conservation leader focused on large-scale prairie restoration, invasive plant removal, and conservation planning. In his spare time, he mountain bikes and throws frisbees to his blue heeler, Anna. Hey, Matt, how's it going?
Good. Glad to be here today.
So happy to have you back. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
So Matt, I know you all take care of thousands and thousands of acres of parkland in Northeast Kansas. And I'm curious, what kind of tasks are you all up to in the landscape this time of year?
Yeah. So we have 9,300 acres for a team of roughly 6, 7 people right now. And so it is a challenging time of year. Everybody's been out in the summer sun every day all summer, and we're really at the height of Sericea lespedeza management. And so folks are out spot spraying and trying to use herbicide on this really aggressive invasive plant. And so everybody has that kind of gaunt, dehydrated, tan look from a long summer. But we're excited to change seasons, and fire lines are going in, and we're prepping and making plans for winter work and things like that. So we're in that transition zone between just the most humid, brutal summer of field work many of us remember, and kind of praying for the cool weather coming this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so looking forward to cooler temps and was pleasantly surprised to see that the end of August is looking quite reasonable compared to what it's been through July. So, well, that's super exciting. It's always cool to hear how you and your crew are doing at Johnson County Parks and Recreation District. Okay, so now let's go ahead and turn our attention to today's program. We're partnering with Johnson County Parks and Recreation District to explore the Blue River Watershed, a critical natural resource that runs through our communities. Together, we'll take a closer look at how land, water, wildlife, and people are all connected through this watershed. So let's get curious, let's ask questions, and let's dive in to the story of the Blue River Watershed with Johnson County Parks and Recreation District. The Blue River flows from southern Overland Park, Kansas, following topography toward the Missouri River. It passes through pastoral grasslands, woodlands, and through the urban core of Kansas City. In our last episode, we saw the river emerge and make its way along a neighborhood that utilizes wetlands to mitigate polluted stormwater while providing habitats for all types of wildlife, like birds, beavers, and insects. In today's episode, we head further east to continue along the Blue River with Johnson County Parks and Recreation District. We visit soon-to-be parkland, discuss wildlife habitat and water quality indicators, as well as take a hike through Camp Branch Glade Park. All right, settle in and get curious for an awe-inspiring adventure in today's webinar with Deep Roots and Johnson County Parks and Recreation District. Let's get started.
I'm Matt Garrett, Natural Resource Manager for the Johnson County Park and Recreation District. Yeah, so we're at a really exciting piece of land called Swallowtail property. So it's not public access at this point. This is future parkland. And it is a piece of land that is directly adjacent to Jackson County, Missouri. And so this is one of our only properties that Johnson County Parks has acquired that directly connects into parkland on the Missouri side. So we are down in the Blue River Valley, and the Swallowtail property, as we call it for now, is going to be part of eventually a Blue River Streamway trail that's going to go into Missouri. And so we're out exploring this future parkland today, and we can jump across the border and be in Missouri and jump back across the fence line and be in Kansas. And so it's a really exciting connection between our two counties.
And where, in relationship to where we visited for our last episode, where is that compared to here? Is it nearby?
So where we're standing is a little further north. It's a little further north into the watershed. And so if we pivoted and walked about 1.5 miles to the southwest, we would be at the Blue River Streamway Trail. And so our goal is to connect all these parcels together and have you eventually be able to get on the Coffee Creek Trail in Heritage Park and then get down along the Blue, jump on to our Blue River Streamway Trail, and then connect over here to Swallowtail. And so sometime in the future, hopefully we'll be able to get all the way over here to Missouri.
I'm in Kansas.
I'm in Missouri. We're standing in a disturbed landscape that I believe has been leveled and opened up. And we'd have to go on like a Google Earth slider and look back and see what kind of ball fields used to be here. We found a payphone in the middle of the field earlier. So you can tell there's been a lot of disturbance here, but we're standing in cattails and sedges. So when we get around to building the trail system, we know that this would be a riparian forest restoration project. And so the goal would be to get this back into a wet prairie edge with kind of an edge of oak and hickory coming out, and planting some riparian trees as well, probably.
Can you describe what some of your restoration efforts would entail in regards to transitioning the woodlands to the prairie?
Yeah, so a lot of our parks have really hard edges. And so we go from a prairie restoration right into forest, and it's just a really hard edge.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's like stacked with eastern red cedar.
Mm-hmm.
And so wildlife have a hard time transitioning from that hard edge through the cedar out into grasslands. And so this is a prime example of how we can feather this edge, open up some of the cedar, plant new oaks out further into the edge of this wet prairie, and be able to open this landscape up and make the transition just a lot more gradual versus the classic hard edge. When we do prescribed fire lines, the prescribed fire lines are generally right on the edge of the wood. And so we're beginning to do the fires in the woods and try to get a mountain bike trail or hiking trail further in and burn off of that versus always having fire right on the edge of the forest. And now we try to do a hybrid where we find part of the woods, part of the prairie together, and it creates more of a transition zone versus the constant blowing, hay, turning right on the edge of the forest. And so the goal is going to be to eventually just kind of make this a smooth transition.
Nice. And so with that smooth transition, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but can you describe more about why wildlife prefer that?
So quail are a great example. One of our grassland birds, that they like softer edges. So they would like trees that have collapsed to perch on and be on. You'd like to see turkeys in this edge when it's not so abrupt. And so a lot of wildlife like a little bit of cover that kind of leaks out into the grasslands where they have an opportunity to jump back in the forest.
Right.
And you'll see that with deer and other wildlife as well. Is they like more of a kind of a safety zone, the transition through, and something to get under on that edge versus just the straight hard forest prairie.
Right.
And then we have a problem with it, and we're trying to fix that as we adjust farming.
Awesome. So would that be considered like once you get more of that feathering between the different habitat types, would that technically be like savanna, or it's more of like a woodland edge?
Yeah, I'd say it's a woodland edge. It's like just the oak hickory to prairie. We live in this world where the prairie meets the oak hickory forest, and that's kind of the landscape of Kansas City. Yeah. At least in the Johnson County side now. And so we were 86% prairie, but we have a lot more forest, especially on these riparian edges. And so we just need to get better about doing it. Our savanna restorations we're doing are more dry uplands, almost glade-like habitat, big oaks and hickories. And we're putting a big prairie understory that can handle some shade. That's more of what our savanna.
Okay.
So this is really going to be a wet prairie where sycamores and cottonwoods are going to be popping up, but we'll try to get some oaks that like their feet wet on this edge.
As cities develop, habitat is destroyed and fragmented at the expense of our communities and wildlife. Not only are habitats shrinking, but the areas that remain tend to be lower quality, disturbed areas, often full of non-native species. This creates a phenomenon known as the edge effect. As environmental conditions change, so does the species composition. Some wildlife is adapted to that edge life, like wild turkey and quail, but many species, like our grassland songbirds, require large expanses of undisrupted land to thrive and reproduce. This wouldn't be an issue if most of our land wasn't already fragmented. This is just another reason why it's important to conserve large, intact landscapes.
All right, so we're standing in a beautiful riparian forest adjacent to a tributary of the Blue River. And there's no bush honeysuckle in this understory. We've seen some really nice bur oaks. We've seen some beautiful pawpaw trees. There's buckeye throughout the forest. And so once we got out of that edge habitat, we got into a really nice, fairly healthy riparian corridor. But one thing that's missing here is a lot of the walnut trees. And so there's an issue in our community on both sides of the state line where illegal logging, where folks have come into parkland under cover of darkness, and they've logged a lot of the walnut understory out of our forest. You have a mosquito on your forehead. We're gonna have to get out of here. So behind us is a really open canopy, and that's where all the mature walnut trees were logged out of this forest. And so our park police force did an investigation, and I believe that they're in the process of prosecution. I don't worry about the criminal side of things, but I know they've been following up and looking, and they seized equipment on site and were able to get some of the equipment from the illegal logging operation. And so It happens on both sides. You'll see it in Jackson County parks. We're seeing it here in Johnson County. And so if you see something unusual on parkland, say something.
We just left the Swallowtail
Property.
yep. So, and we made our way a little bit south. Where are we now?
So we are on Camp Branch Creek. So there's a brand new streamway trail that was just paved recently. Not quite open to the public, but it's going to be one of our first access points to a tributary of the Gillis. And so we are standing right here on this beautiful stream corridor. And Camp Branch is the last intact creek in Johnson County that when we've looked and researched and the states looked at this location, this is one of the last truly functioning creek ecosystems left in southern Johnson County. So it's an absolutely phenomenal resource that we're working hard to protect.
Some things I've already seen while we're down here are some crawdads, some water skimmers. I've seen some little fish. So clearly this is such an important water resource for wildlife of all sizes. Indicator species are creatures that give clues to the health of an environment. For example, macroinvertebrates like mayflies, stoneflies, and caddisflies indicate high-quality water. These creatures are sensitive to poor water quality and will not be found in areas with pollution or disturbance. On land, plant and animal species that are present can indicate the health and type of landscape too. As an example, if you find rose verbena or biscuit root, you're likely in a glade where the soil is shallow and bedrock exposed. Meanwhile, turkey and white-tailed deer thrive in early successional habitats, like young forests and fields.
You don't see the kinds of cut banks here. You'll still see some erosion, but we're high enough up in this watershed that we're not seeing giant 10, 20-foot banks of, that are getting large amounts of urban stream runoff. And so this is still a fairly undeveloped area. And so a lot of the development around here that our park system is going to do with our new parkland as we build it out is going to make sure that we're using rain gardens and bioswales and things like that to try to capture runoff before it goes into this creek.
Nice. And so does this creek feed into the Blue River?
Yeah. So just south of us is our future Camp Branch Park, about 240 acres of parkland that's not built yet. We're just getting ready to open this future paved trail. And then that's all, this creek and this land will all flow towards the Blue River.
Nice.
The future Camp Branch Park site sits at the corner of 183rd Street and Mission Road. The 236-acre park started a master planning process in the fall of 2018. We engaged community members, community partners, and had a steering committee that all gave public input. We had focus groups, and we eventually came up with the master plan that you see. We started with a site analysis where we looked at potential prairie options, where trails could go, where are the high-quality natural areas, where are the wetlands, and then looked at trail connections to Camp Branch Glade and how things can connect to the Blue River Streamway or Camp Branch Streamway. So after that site analysis, you can see Exhibit 5. This has a really thoughtful park site with wildflower prairie restoration areas, passive open space, savanna restoration, hiking trails, and multiple features for the public to engage with Camp Branch in a little corner of the property. So overall, the public process created a master plan vision for what this park site will look like. And then it will connect into the Camp Branch Streamway, which will connect into Coffee Creek and the Blue River Streamway, and be adjacent to our Camp Branch Glade site. So JCPRD has made a large investment in the Blue River corridor. In a few years, this project may be funded by the park commissioners, and when that does eventually get funded, this park will be built out according to this final concept plan that you see. So we're at Camp Branch Glade, which is a nature park that's managed by Johnson County Park and Recreation District. And it's a small, really accessible nature park. It's really good for families. It has short trails. They're open whether it's rain or shine. There's really neat topography. We're going to see some deep rock, like limestone bluffs and creeks, but it's a small space. And when we initially opened this park, we found prickly pear cactus where I'm standing now on this rocky limestone substrate. And we had giant ambitions to let's just make this amazing glade restoration. We have 9,300 acres of natural areas. And so the care and the restoration process for this glade fell off the back of the project list. And so we're finishing up a new restoration plan for the system for the next 10 years, and there is a funded project to fully restore this area, remove all the bush honeysuckle, remove the brome, and get this into an actual functioning glade ecosystem where you've got this limestone and all these hard scrabble prairie plants growing amongst all the rock. And so we'll be removing hedge, we'll be removing a lot of hackberry and these species that are coming in on the edge. A lot of eastern red cedar will be removed. And so this is a park that is open and it's awesome to explore. It's very easy and accessible. But we call it a glade and we never quite got to the glade habitat. So that's a project that is coming. And you'll see some invasive removal this winter. And then over the next decade, you'll see this turned into a full-scale glade restoration.
Very cool.
So you can see we have the soil, we have the rocks, we just don't have the plants.
Can you talk a little bit about deer pressure?
Yeah, so this is a site that has probably some of our highest deer density. And so we have done some restoration work here. We planted Echinacea pallida, and the deer have just grazed them down. And so we currently have hunting at 3 public parks, and we'll probably eventually look at adding hunting to Camp Ranch. Camp Ranch Glade is too small, but the adjacent parkland we have could be large enough for deer hunting, which would take pressure off this site as well. So where we're standing now, there's a lot of grass, and so I would use a grass-specific herbicide that would kill off all the grass on the site, and that would leave any forbs and the prickly pear cactus that are hanging on alone. And so with that grass-specific herbicide, that would open this up, we'd burn it off, make sure we have that cool season European grass under control, and then we would thin these forest edges and get the cedar out, get the hedge out, and then we would do a heavy overseeding of glade-specific wildflowers, probably on snow. And then we'd come back and probably plug pockets of really conservative glade species that are hard to grow from seed. And then 3 to 5 years from there, we'd have a really nice open south-facing glade.
Johnson County Parks and Recreation District cares for thousands of acres of land throughout northeast Kansas. Land quality ranges from poor fields undergoing reconstruction to high-quality old-growth prairies and woodlands. They utilize a floristic quality assessment created by Doug Ladd and Justin Thomas. This assessment measures the richness and diversity of species in an area over time and determines best land management practices. If you dig deeper, you'll come across a term called coefficient of conservatism, or C-value. This is a pre-assigned scale from 0 to 10 that indicates the chance, out of 10, that a plant can be found in a stable, late successional habitat. Species that rank a 0 to 3 are adapted to disturbed sites and tend to outcompete other species. Think annual ragweed, which ranks at a 0, or white snakeroot, which ranks as a 2. Compare this to an intact natural community, which shows plants with values ranging from 4 to 6. Anything higher than that means we're in the presence of a potentially remnant, old-growth land that hasn't had its soil disturbed. Conservation of this land is paramount, as most of these areas are small and highly fragmented across the region.
So we're at this little plunge pool at Camp Ranch Glade. So this is one of my favorite spots in this little park. It's this beautiful limestone shelf with the spring water that drops in and creates this beautiful clear pool of water. It's just an absolutely amazing spot. Just the noise of the water, the birds, the bugs. This is just like a perfect little spot at Camp Ranch Glade to really enjoy nature. And so it's on the outer trail loop that's on the east side of the park, and the trail crosses this. And so it's just an absolutely wonderful spot for the kiddos to enjoy, look for crawdads, look for frogs, and explore. So yeah, this neat little limestone shelf is broken off and has just created this gorgeous little spring here.
Even with dry trails, we saw several terrestrial mushroom species, like the Lactarius mushroom. Okay, I want you all to see this little cutie friend real quick. Spined Microthena, or Microthena gracilis. It's this cute little spider that to me looks like it's got a little cathedral on its back.
Oh, yeah.
And I love seeing them this time of year. Oh, and that's a part of his body? Yeah. Isn't that crazy? You're too big. Right behind us. Yeah. Oops, sorry, friend. And see how they're shaking their web to scare us?
Oh, yeah.
Hey, I'm big and scary. You don't want to mess
Twitching
with
the
me.
web.
Yeah. You are big and brave. It comes as no surprise that the health of our water and land is intersectional, impacting one another. As individuals, there's plenty we can do to support conservation efforts across our region. One way is to frequent these parklands and be good stewards while you visit. Stay on designated trails and take photos, not flowers, during your hikes. Deep Roots hosts guided naturalist walks and other outdoor experiences seasonally with Johnson County Parks and Recreation District. You can also volunteer with organizations like KC Wildlands Seed Team, who collects native plant seed which are sown back into prairie and woodland restorations across the region. Planting native makes a huge difference too. Deep Roots hosts native plant sales in the spring and fall across the metro. And though native gardens aren't the same as high-quality natural communities, they do protect the health of our watershed and provide food and habitat for wildlife. The more we support native landscapes, large and small, the bigger the change we can have in our communities. Stick around. Our live Q&A with guest expert Matt Garrett of Johnson County Parks and Recreation District is coming up next.
All right. I'd like to go ahead and welcome Matt back to the virtual stage. Thank you for taking us on that adventure a few weeks ago to visit New Parkland and Camp Branch Glade Park. That was so much fun.
Yeah, so many mosquitoes.
So many mosquitoes. Okay, folks. Yeah, that Jurassic Park size mosquitoes right on my forehead. It was wild. But that's one of the joys of getting outside is getting close to our
Yep.
wildlife.
We were standing in shin deep water.
Yeah, we really were. Okay, so we have some really great questions, but before I jump in to our questions, I want to remind folks that we will be doing a pop quiz towards the end of our session today. And if you answer the question correctly, you'll win a copy of the Sand County Almanac by Aldo Leopold, as well as one of our Ask Me About My Milkweed bumper stickers. So be sure to stick around, and one lucky winner who answers our question correctly will win that prize today. So, okay. So I want to start off with Joyce's question about water quality. How clean is the water in the tributaries and the Blue River, at least on the Kansas side? Let's talk about the health there.
Yeah, so I know that the state of Kansas did some research into Camp Branch, and they did a report a few years ago about all the invertebrates, and that's generally what we look at stream health is, well, the good invertebrates or the high quality invertebrates that are present there. The Blue River report card, I think, is probably our best bet for getting the health of the Blue River on the Kansas and the Missouri side. And I know that I believe the report card kind of inched up a little bit the last time that Heartland Conservation Alliance put it out. But I don't know the actual current water quality of the blue, but I believe it had trended a little higher in their last report card.
Yeah, and folks, I'll be sure to include that link to the Blue River Health Report Card in the show notes here. From what I recall, it's the entire river, which again, remember, it spans 41 miles, starting in on the Kansas side in deep Overland Park, and makes its way up through the urban core of Kansas City near the sports complexes, and then dumps out into the Missouri River. So it's got a variation of land and habitat types. But kind of on that topic, Matt, what are some of the biggest threats to water quality in this area? And what is Johnson County Parks and Recreation District doing to help kind of mitigate some of those threats?
Yeah, I did check, and it looks like the 25 report card is being updated right now. So the newest information on the Blue River is coming soon. So development is going to be the biggest stressor on Camp Branch, Coffee Creek, Blue River, Wolf Creek, all these tributaries. The development in southern Johnson County is going to be the biggest stressor on the systems there.
Okay, good to know. Um, and while we're on the topic of our watershed health, I wanted to share a couple responses from our audience. Earlier, I asked folks to imagine what do they imagine, what ideas or image pops into their head when they think watershed. And our friend Sally Yerdang says, watershed. I imagine a place where water collects after a rain and a place water drains into. And then I'd also like to share Christine's answer, which is a large area where water soaks in and drains to a stream, underground aquifer, or both. Gentle slope and trees help water seep into the ground. Both are really lovely answers there.
I think a lot of people may not realize that our streamway corridors, when they're biking them or hiking them, they are massive stormwater systems. And so when Johnson County Park District owns a large section of Mill Creek, Kill Creek, Coffee Creek, the Blue River Streamway, whenever there's a flood and the flood expands out onto our park landscape and is absorbed into prairies, into wetlands, it really takes a lot of the energy out and really makes systems more resilient versus if there were houses, within a couple hundred feet of the rivers and the creeks. So a lot of our recreational trail systems have that dual function of really strong stormwater control.
That's good to know. I mean, I'm embarrassed to admit, I am fairly new to understanding the value of our watershed. Only the past few years have really started to realize how important it is, not just for the health of our water systems, but for everything that they come into contact with. And so it's just something that is easily overlooked, I think, and that we sometimes take for granted. So
Yeah, these systems are really dynamic. And so we recently had a 10-inch rainstorm that destroyed some of our bridges and brings invasive seeds into our fields and prairies and puts logs across trails. And there's a huge benefit to having it, but there's a real challenge in quickly getting some of our trail systems back open after we have a large scale flooding event. Staff have to pivot from regular duties and rebuild bridges and bring in engineers to assess structures, and sometimes these larger and larger storms are bringing some quantities of water we haven't seen sometimes.
yeah, that's scary to see these once in a thousand year storms happening every other year, it seems like, or maybe more often than that now. Okay, so I have a couple questions about the master plan for Camp Branch Glade. Um, so Anonymous asks if the master plan concept and other materials are still available to view online. And
Yeah. Yep.
yeah, so we're going to include that in the resource, a link to that in the resources as well. But is there anything you want to add to that, Matt?
Oh yeah, all of our park master plans are on the web, and so the 236-acre future park there, all those documents are available for the public to digest. And we're always updating plans, and so even a current park has a master plan. And once that's been static for a while, we go back to the public. So Shawnee Mission is going to be one that's going to be coming up in a couple years to kind of make sure we're trending in the right direction. And then Stoll and Heritage Park are currently being master planned right now, and trying to make sure that we're keeping up with current trends in recreation, and natural areas and active areas are in a good ratio, things like that. So we're all our planning folks are always looking at master plans, whether the park's built or not.
Nice. Okay. Laura Moreland asks, does the restructured Glade project plant new trees in another area to replace good trees cut down? She's having a hard time viewing the forest destruction in Lee Summit for development.
Yeah. So what we'd be looking on that side is opening up the south-facing glade with hedge and locust and eastern red cedar and some aggressive successional trees. Those thinnings would be complemented with some black hickory and some post oak and some oak trees that you would generally see in a drier landscape. So once we get all the invasives out and cleared out some of the lower quality trees, that yeah, we would eventually be bringing back some of the drier upland trees that would be native to the area.
Okay. Carolyn is asking, how do you control beefsteak plant? This is a non-native invasive we saw earlier here in the video. And she also mentions, should you try and remove or treat ragweed and horseweed as a follow-up?
Yeah, if we had a food pyramid of bad invasive plants, I would not lose sleep about ragweed or beefsteak plant. We see them, but they're not changing ecosystems. They're not like a driver of change. They're usually thriving in some sort of an ecological niche that has been left open, but they're not changing habitats. And so the other day, I came across on my evening walk last night an invasive clematis plant that I on my walk to the park, I saw it on someone's fence, and then we went to the park, and now there's a 30-foot long trailing clematis plant. So that does stuff like new species like that concern me that maybe are coming from the southeast, but it's the bush honeysuckles and the things that are driving actual changing of ecosystems that keep us up at night. As much as ragweed bothers our sinuses, grassland birds love ragweed. So yeah, some of these lower level kind of nichey invasives or exotic species are not something we lose sleep over.
That makes a lot of sense. Was it sweet autumn clematis that you saw?
Yeah, and it was beginning to take over a couple trees, and you can see how it escaped the yard.
Right.
And I think as our region warms a little bit, where I know it's a problem further east, that those are the little plants that start to put off alarms in my head.
Yeah, for sure. There's a huge one growing on top of a bush honeysuckle at in my neighbor's yard across the street from me, and I find it in my garden all the time now, and so I'm constantly pulling out those vines. So there's always new invasive species, well, new to us, new to our area. But it's good to know that some are less of a concern and like you said, are just filling in kind of that gap in the meantime. But if you were to control beefsteak plant, do you have any recommendations on application for that?
I'd have to. It'd be when it comes to herbicide, reading a label and seeing what herbicide is labeled for beefsteak plant and using whatever is on that label. So it's not one I've ever looked at controlling. But yeah, it'd be label specific and doing some research into what state agencies list as a control method for it. It's not something I've looked into.
No worries. Okay. Patty asks, do the various cities in Johnson County have regulations pertaining to the draining or cleaning of large swimming pool facilities? Do they get permits to drain into the sewer systems or water treatment plants?
Good question.
Great question. I was like, I don't know. I don't know. We'll
Yeah, I don't know. I assume that something like that it happens, but I don't really, neither of us are water experts.
yeah.
Yeah, it's my understanding, they need to stop putting chemicals in it so the chlorine changes. Like you can't dump heavily chlorinated water into the system, but what the cities do to manage that is out of the scope of what I do.
Okay. Yeah. Understandable. Patty also mentions that a great way for folks who want to get involved in protecting water health, especially on the Kansas side, Kansas State Master Naturalists have a water quality team that does regular water quality testing at various sites all over Johnson County. They collect data on macro and microinvertebrates, as well as water flow, nitrate and nitrite testing, and more. And I will say, I've done this on the Missouri side, and I love nothing more than splashing in a creek and looking for critters. So it's a really fun opportunity. And if you aren't already a master naturalist on either side of the state line, highly recommend you do this. It furthers your education on our natural systems of all types here in our region, and then you're also able to give back through volunteer opportunities, and a lot of which you end up working with myself and Matt in various capacities. So that's really fun.
Yeah, so there is an Olathe high school teacher that he and his students have actually looked at salinity in our local creeks and rivers, and they have been out monitoring and creating a data set of how much salt after snow events are in like the watersheds in Olathe, and he's looked at some really interesting research where the volume of salt in some of these creeks and rivers doubles, triples, and gets near like ocean water after a snow event with the amount of municipal salt that gets put down. And so, outside of stream teams, there's even local schools that are really digging deep into water quality and trying to come up with recommendations maybe on how communities could do with a little less salt for how much impact it can put into some of these systems.
Yeah, it's so tricky, and it just kind of echoes the importance of being conscious about what you're putting into the soil. Of course, we talk about proper herbicide applications and reading label is the law, right? Um, but also another reason why folks have talked about like horticulture grade vinegar, which is actually a lot worse than some of our herbicides because it really penetrates and stays in our soil compared to some of those herbicides. So, really important just to do your research, folks, before you apply anything because it all ends up downstream in our neighbors' corridors. So, be aware.
Yeah, I read a label the other day. I picked up, so it was the Roundup label in from just a grocery store or the hardware store, and it no longer contains glyphosate, but it has four other active ingredients. And so people read the label and or read the front of a container and expect it to be something, and the actual active ingredients are completely different now, and may actually, if you apply it, it could hurt trees in your yard and some other things versus the glyphosate. So if you as just a home gardener, making sure you really read the label on things before you apply them is really important.
It's so true. Our a friend of the show, Angela Sokolowski, she's the invasive species coordinator for Missouri Department of Conservation. She just wrote an article about this, I think earlier this year. But I bought Roundup, like glyphosate, what I thought was glyphosate, 3 years ago. And when I read that article this year, I went and looked and realized no glyphosate. So this has been an ongoing thing. And of course, glyphosate is, all herbicides and chemicals can be dangerous if you don't have the proper PPE and if you aren't applying things judiciously. So make sure you read the labels and be safe about it. But there are some chemicals that can do more harm than others. So just be aware of that. So continuing along the line of invasive species control and chemical usage, do you know what the best method to control sweet autumn clematis is? Have you started looking into that or
It's my understanding a triclopyr product. There's an herbicide called Crossbow that I might investigate using on it if we find it in our parkland. So I found it into adjacent city parkland outside of my jurisdiction, and usually when I see something like that, I'll send a note to a land manager and just let them know we found something, because that definitely goes downstream from their creek watershed into a park that I manage, and just like on K10, all the problems from Department of Transportation mowers pull invasives to our park sites. And collaboratively in Missouri, there's strike teams of people from DOTs working with nonprofits and MDC, and these problems don't stay put. So everybody's got to really work collaboratively to solve them.
absolutely, absolutely. I want to share one more audience um, example of what they imagined when they see a watershed. Friend of the show, Meredith Donaldson. So great to see you on here, Meredith. And I just really loved her how she captured the watershed. Um, she expresses grab a piece of paper marked with streams with water soluble markers, and then crumple it. Spray it with water, simulating rain, and tilt the page slightly. Then you can see what it's like to how a watershed functions. It's simple, but it illustrates. She asks kids to take another paper and draw a river in the water with tributaries with soluble markers populated with houses, urban structures, wildlife, etc., drawn with permanent marker. And then you add the water soluble colors to show what we put on the land, trash, fertilizer, etc. And then you make it rain again. Then you can really see how that stuff flows into our river in our watershed type area. So thank you for sharing that, Meredith. That is a lovely visual. Okay, so I've got just one more question and then we'll jump into our pop quiz before we end our program today. Cheryl is asking, what chemical and concentration do you use to manage Sericea lespedeza? She has a small 6A remnant that is being overtaken. I'm not sure what 6A means, but
Yeah, so our team right now is using a product called Pasture Guard, and we're having a hard time fighting Remedy Ultra, but they're both triclopyr products, and it's label specific. K-State and MDC both put out information on it, on how many ounces per gallon, and that in a backpack or if we're in a UTV. And then almost more important than looking at the stated rate, like 1 ounce per gallon or 2 ounces per gallon, you really need to make sure your sprayer is calibrated, because you can put something at 1 ounce per gallon, but if your machine is putting out twice that, you're using a lot of product. And so there's online resources to make sure with a bucket and time, you can figure out how much volume of water is coming out of a machine or out of a backpack. Because even if you put in the stated amount, if you go through it 3 times faster than you should, that's a lot of chemical going down. So making sure whatever you're using is calibrated helps a lot. But here shortly, as Lespedeza begins to bloom, we're going to change to a chemical called Escort XP, and it works better and it's more thoughtful, uh, more judicious use of herbicide later in the season. And so we're going to transition products as it moves from just vegetation to flowering and seeding. And so we're going to change tactics as we change seasons, and we're actually going to use fire. So I was going to try to do a fire tomorrow, but the humidity continues to be high. So mid next week, we have some prairies. We're going to actually do a growing season fire maybe next Wednesday and burn a field that's got some sericea issues, and knock that back without herbicide. So we try to use a few different kinds of methods, but the humidity this summer has just been absolutely brutal for a growing season fire.
That's rough. Yeah. The logistics of prescribed fire are on another level. I can't even imagine what it's like for a growing season burn. So
Yeah, so that's our next video will be really fun to have.
it will be. So yeah, sneak peek for you all. In November, Matt, Garrett, and I will be covering prescribed fires, which is a really great tool in the toolkit for managing land, both prairies and woodlands. So I hope you will tune in then for that program. And then before we jump to the pop quiz, Matt, I just wanted to let you know one of our viewers, Alexander, wants to know if you're familiar with the Little Blue River Basin Flood Risk and Ecosystem Restoration Project. They are having a couple upcoming public meetings in Grandview and Blue Springs. So folks who are passionate and knowledgeable about river watershed health and want to support our rivers and waterways, look into that for more information.
Nice.
Okay. And now for our pop quiz. So the way this works, folks, is the first person to answer correctly in the chat will win our prize today. And make sure at where you can enter in the chat, you mark everyone so that your message or your answer goes out to everyone, not just the host, not just to some random person who's also tuning in today. Okay, without further ado, what phenomenon describes the impact of habitat fragmentation where two habitats meet? We discussed this earlier in today's program, and the first person to get this answer correctly will win a copy of Sand County Almanac and a bumper sticker, Ask Me About My Milkweed. And it looks like Meredith Donaldson got the answer correct. It is called the edge effect. So congrats, Meredith. You will be receiving another piece of mail from me, which is a lovely copy of one of my favorite books that I like to refer to every year. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Matt, again, for joining us as our guest expert. It's always a fun journey to spend time with you out in nature and share it with everyone else in our community. So thank you again for joining us on Curious by Nature with Deep Roots. And we hope to see you all next time on Thursday, September 4th at noon, where we're going to explore urban rooftop gardens in the growing season. So tune in, and we look forward to seeing you all next time.
Thanks.